Parents got divorced, and I truly don't remember much about my childhood before 8. Like, it's crazy. Like, I remember almost nothing. Um,
Wow.
and then the memories start to pick up a bit after 8th grade. So this is when I realized my mom had started getting into drugs, and I think I was around a freshman in high school when I absolutely knew that she was a drug addict. Um,
Welcome back to Resilient Moms. This is episode 3. My name is Kara, and with me today is Brittany, and we are so excited. Today, Brittany will be sharing a little bit of her story. Brittany, can you start by sharing a little bit about your background and the specific experiences of trauma that have helped shape your journey?
Yeah, so until recently, I thought it was always just one experience, and then I realized so much of my trauma has come from developmental trauma from my entire childhood. So I think it really starts with like my dad was absent a lot. He worked and then was out with friends, and he just wasn't home consistently. And so I was generally raised by my mom and my grandma. And then around 8, my parents got divorced, and I truly don't remember much about my childhood before 8. Like, it's crazy. Like, I remember almost nothing. Um,
Wow.
and then the memories start to pick up a bit after 8th grade. So this is when I realized my mom had started getting into drugs, and I think I was around a freshman in high school when I absolutely knew that she was a drug addict. Um, and we were living with my grandma at this point, and my grandma was basically raising us. Like, my mom couldn't hold a job. She couldn't attend my cheer competitions. There was just this blank stare always. And I watched her lose herself, to drugs, and that might have been the hardest thing that I've ever experienced. Like, she did end up losing her battle to addiction when I was 17 years old, which made her 37. And I just thought, like, that was the, traumatic experience, right? How we talked about we didn't understand what trauma truly was. I just thought at 17, my mom died of a drug overdose. And that was my traumatic experience. What I did not realize was how much of an impact living with a drug addict had for 3 years did to me.
Wow. I mean, I can't even imagine, to be honest with you, right? That wasn't my experience at all. And to have that experience at such a young age and watch your mother go through that honestly has to be heartbreaking in so many different ways. How did you handle her passing?
Honestly, looking back on it now, I think I completely dissociated from the experience. I remember taking a week off of school, and then I went back and I couldn't handle it. Like, I recognized that, and I took another week off. So I took a total of 2 weeks off of school. But after that, like, life just kept going on, right? She passed when I was at the end of junior year. So I enjoyed the summer with my friends. I poured my life into cheer. And then I had a senior year to worry about, like all of the things you want in your senior year. Prom, I had a new boyfriend. We were going to homecoming. And so I poured myself into the joys of my current life. And I dissociated from every emotion I had after her passing.
Wow. At what point, I mean, being so young, at what point did you realize that you were carrying trauma?
Not until I was 34, like within the past year or two. I had gone to therapy for the past 10 years. Like, starting in college, I was in therapy. And it was just traditional talk therapy where I learned how to set boundaries, and I learned that I could not control everyone, because one of my coping mechanisms was I couldn't control my mom, so I better control everyone else or something really bad is going to happen. And so
Hmm.
therapy led me to create boundaries with people. But then I even had like a therapist tell me you just need to be more zen, right? Like, okay, one, how do I do that? Could you please help me? That's kind of why I'm here. And it sounded awesome, but zen wasn't me. It was not my personality. And so I felt like I always went to therapy for a quick fix on something that was externally happening in my life. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sleeping well, right? I'd go to therapy, fix the problem, stop going to therapy. And it was during COVID that I became I enjoyed the time off of work. I just had a 6-month-old. It was my first child, and I got so much more time with her. And then as it continued, I got a little more depressed because I wasn't seeing anyone. I was stuck in my own mind. I realize now as a new mom, my priorities completely changed. I didn't want to give everything to my classroom anymore, right? I had a family I wanted to take care of, and I didn't know how to find that balance. And it felt like my life kind of blew up a bit. Um, and so I started reading about joy and happiness. The first book I read was called The Joy Plan. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I wanted more. You remember this, right? I
I
remember
remember.
how
Yes.
I was telling you about it. Like, truly, I think that book was the start of my journey was 5 years ago. Can you believe that was 5 years ago?
No, I can't believe it was 5 years ago. I feel like it was just yesterday you were telling me about that book, and I still need to read the book. It's in my Amazon cart. I'll get there. I promise I'll get there one day. But yes, I feel like it was just yesterday that, I mean, both of us started really talking deeply about our past experiences.
Mhm. Yeah, and through this book, I just wanted more joy and more happiness. Like I had done all of the things I was supposed to do, right? I had achieved everything I saw that I wanted in life. And then I got it all and I still wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
This led me to more research. I started reading more self help books, more personal growth books. And it led me to back to therapy, which I found a therapist who did more body based somatic approaches, thanks to you. Thank you again. And I learned through this process that the trauma I was carrying was not my identity. It was just the
Mm-hmm.
coping mechanisms that I needed to survive as a child.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? What do you think some of your biggest challenges that you faced in your personal journey, healing journey?
Yeah, well, many, right? Because healing is not linear at all. Like it is a true roller coaster. And I could say the whole process started during COVID when I read that book, and that was
Mm-hmm.
like the beginning of it. But I feel like it was sooner than that. Like I didn't know what was happening, but I felt like I was having a midlife crisis every 6 months at the age of like 30, right? And
Yeah.
that I don't think everyone has those feelings. So I was always searching for more. Growing in my job, I always wanted to move up. Like I'd move up to one spot and then it stay there for a little bit and then I'd want to move up again. Like always wanting more. I would get there and the feelings would never go away, right? Like the foundational feelings never changed. I always wanted to improve in something, which doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it was the only thing that I was searching for. Like I was searching for some external thing, and I had to be better than the best in everything I did. And once I realized that that actually is a traumatic related experience, I really dug into my reading, and I have read a tremendous amount of it. Um, the next book I read was like The Mountain Is You, and it's all about self sabotaging, and it gives you tips and how to not self sabotage. And one of the biggest challenges I had in this healing journey is that I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I knew the
Mm-hmm.
tools. I had the knowledge and I couldn't do any of it. I could not implement the things that I knew would make me better. And so I really wanted to go fast in this journey. And that was another challenge for me because I wanted to hurry up and just be fixed, right? Like, I am a fixer. Okay, give me the tools and let me be healed. And
Yes.
and that's not how healing works.
Nope. Not at all. I mean, just like we talked about in the last episode, you have to start small. We have this idea of that big picture where we want to get to, and you can't just, I mean, even think about a certain project, right? If you're working on a house project, you don't just go like this, snap your fingers and it's done. You have to say, okay, if I'm redoing my bathroom, first I have to rip out all the old stuff. And do I have to rip out the floor or just the tile? Do I have to replace the drywall? Then you go out and you buy the new subfloor and the new tile, and then you've got to paint and put in new cabinets. Maybe you need a new toilet, right? It's a journey. It is not, you don't get there all of a sudden. It just doesn't happen. And that is the exact same way with healing. And sometimes, just like working on a house project, you run into an electrical issue and you have to now rip out another piece of the drywall and start all over. Is the exact same thing with healing, right? Just like I had mentioned last episode, going back a couple of years ago, I had, wanted to start speaking, and then I went into a depressive episode. It's a back and forth. It's very much like a roller coaster.
Right. You definitely don't want to put the cart before the horse. Right.
Yeah.
So go slow to actually see progress.
Yeah, absolutely. How did all of your experiences that you've gone through, how did they influence your decision to become a generational trauma coach?
Yeah, so through a lot of the reading that I had done, I had learned that trauma is not just the experience, right? It is the body's felt sensation in response to the experience, but it can also get passed down through generations. And this blew my mind. And as a mother, I want to do everything I can to protect my children. And knowing if I can help them regulate their nervous systems while they are children, they will become self-regulated adults. So I instantly knew I needed to learn more so that my kids did not experience what I did. And then once I realized that my identity was not a worrywart or a fun governor, which I had been called a lot, that these were just adaptations put in place to protect me, I felt an immense need to share my learning with others. So if I can shed my different parts and find my true self to give myself and my kids the best life so that we're thriving and not surviving, that is not information I feel I can hold, right? Like if I can have that transformation, it is too much to keep to myself. All women, all moms, all humans deserve to shed their past and live a life that they love and enjoy. And so I just had to get that message out there and support people who have experienced similar traumas that I have.
Talk about chills, right? I literally have goosebumps right now. What a powerful message. And I want to circle back just for a second. You said, your experiences you didn't want to pass down to your kids. And when I think about my experiences with my parents, or anybody could grow up and say, oh, well, I'm not going to be like my mom, right? Or I'm not going to be like my grandma, right? And that could be anybody. But all of a sudden, if you're not working on that or finding those characteristics or behaviors inside of yourself, or you don't know about those markers passed down in your genes, you can't put a stop to it. It will all of a sudden happen. And then you will continue to pass it down and pass it down and pass it down. So that is, I know one of the things that you want to do here is put a stop to that so we can become aware forward in a really healthy way.
That is to no fault of anyone's. What's crazy is we as human beings, as adults, will say our subconscious brain runs 95% of our lives. Okay. 95% is run by our subconscious, which means we are unaware of it.
Wow.
This is the crazy part. Our subconscious brain is developed completely by the age of 7. So the beliefs that we hold are because of our parents and what environment we had up until 7 years old. And so when we can think and hope and say, I don't want to be like my mother. But if we don't be aware of what we are doing and intentional about our parenting, the subconscious is going to run it all based on our childhood programming anyways.
Wow. That's crazy. Talking about that, what strategies or tools, have been most effective for you breaking that cycle of trauma in your own life?
Yeah. So I think knowing that the number one thing that you have to do is be consciously aware, right? Consciously aware, and you have to feel safe in that awareness. And set intentions, like I was aware. I'm going to back up. So there are 4 steps to learning. One is you don't even know what you don't know, right? You can't know what you don't know. The second step is you are consciously aware of everything, but you are not changing anything. Okay. And that's like one of the worst places to be. And that's where I was, because I knew all of the issues I was having, and I now understood that they came from trauma, and I knew what I needed to do, but I did not know how to implement those things into my life. And so the next stage of learning would be you are consciously competent. That means you are integrating everything. It takes work at this stage, but you are implementing it. And so for me, I needed help doing that. And I needed it twofold. So I had my therapist who was working on body-based techniques with me and talk therapy. And I was working with a one-on-one coach who was helping me keep the accountability that I needed to use the tools that I had been learning. And she helped me form self-compassion and love, which is the foundation of healing. And also, I would add that through therapy, there are so many different modalities that I think most people are not even aware of. Like talk therapy is not just it anymore. So I started going through the process of EMDR, which was part of this therapy that made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, because I've been hearing about that a lot lately. What is somatics and EMDR?
Yeah, so somatics means relating to the body. And so that is the feeling of the emotion of wherever it is in your body and moving its energy, right? Talk therapy doesn't help do that.
Brittany, why do you think that talk therapy doesn't work for trauma healing?
Yeah, so it has to do with how our brain is actually shaped and how it functions. And so where the trauma is stored cannot be accessed through cognitive thoughts. So because the trauma is stored in our body, we cannot think our way out of feeling, right? Feeling actually, like the emotions that we have, it starts with a feeling in your body. So anger, right? You might feel it in your chest. Your heart might start pounding. Cognitively, we associate that sensation with the emotion anger. So we are just putting a label on our body to kind of understand it. But if we only think in this cognitive space, I'm angry, and we don't connect it to the body, we're only fixing a small portion of it. We're only addressing a very small portion. So we have to be able to address both of them so that our brains, right, can speak in the felt sense and the cognitive sense.
Interesting. And so I know you started talking about somatics a little bit more, but what is EMDR? What does that look like, especially for any of our audience members who might be interested in doing it in the future? Can you talk about that just a little bit more?
Yeah, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it is a process that allows you to go back to a memory that may have contributed to a core belief that you hold. And
I have a question. What is the memory something that actually happened, or?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So what happens is your feelings are attached to something. So whatever your feeling is attached to will get explored, whether it happened or not. Because the feeling within the body is there, and you just have to process that portion. And so the memory could have been made up. My first memory, I'm pretty sure, was made up, trying to go back, but it didn't matter. Like, the feeling I felt was so real. It was just, what image did I attach to it?
Interesting. But yes, exactly. Going back and talking about, validating experiences and everything, the feelings that you had are completely valid, but the memory or the vision that you're attaching it to may not have even happened. Wow, that's so important to know. Very interesting. Is there anything else about EMDR or somatics that you'd like our audience to know, especially if they're looking to explore it on their own?
Yeah, I would say somatics you can definitely explore on your own. There's a lot of somatic coaches out there, which that is actually something I'm currently getting trained in. EMDR, you would need a licensed specialized therapist who is certified in EMDR. There's a lot of work. It's like an art, right? Like you are going to be experiencing a lot of different things. I want to say in my second session, I thought I was going to puke. And I stopped
Wow.
myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop. And she's like, oh, no. People puke in here. People scream. People throw things. Like, this is your body
Wow.
releasing that energy. And so you need to, it's not something you can do on your own. And you can't just go see anyone. So you need a certified therapist. They also have tools that you use. So the eye movement, right, is this. So you might have heard of bilateral sounds where you hear, and it is connecting the right and the left brain. And so my therapist specifically uses a tool that is a vibration tool. And so
Okay.
it is processing while the right and left brain are kind of like talking to each other, which doesn't always happen. You have to make that happen.
Does she ask you questions or anything like that while you're doing the vibrations?
Yeah, so the process is you start with the belief that you're holding. I'm trying to think what
Okay.
my last one was. Did two processing so far. So the first belief I was holding was that I am unlovable. And
Hmm.
the second belief I was holding is I don't matter. And
Hmm.
so you think of that belief and what image comes to mind. Like you kind of before everything happens, you map out your life. You're like, okay, what is it that you're feeling right now that you no longer want to feel? Where's the last time you felt that? And you go through your entire timeline of your life, and then you start at the beginning and you just process every memory all the way through. And so once you find the image that you're working on, the memory that you're working on, you hold your vibrations and you close your eyes, and she just says, as you are looking at this image or memory, what do you notice? You share what you notice, and then you explain, and then she says, notice it. Stops, explain what you noticed. Then she says, notice it. And you just keep noticing it. And it's crazy the things that come up. I think we need to do like a whole session. Like we'll just do a whole episode on EMDR because it is so crazy.
I love that. I love that. Well, great. Well, we can move on a little bit from this as we will definitely make sure to create space and take time to talk about this a little bit more. But as you're growing as a coach, are there some common patterns or issues you see in the moms that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in my clients, the most common patterns I see are self-doubt. So not, the ability to not move forward because they don't think they can in whatever move forward means to them. People pleasing. So
Mm-hmm.
always putting other people before themselves, which in turn goes to, not being able to set proper boundaries, which then hinders on their self-compassion. There's not a whole lot of self-compassion in the moms that I start working with.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I even have run into that myself.
Oh yeah, those were all me. All me.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones. We know that there are more women out there who are running through the same problems as we have in the past or are still now. How do you help moms begin to process the process of healing and creating a life that they do truly desire and deserve?
Yeah. Because everyone deserves this. And so to truly heal, you need first to feel safe. So, that your feelings are validated, that you are loved, and that you just have space to share. So, safe within the client coach relationship and safety within yourself so that you feel safe in your own body. And once you start looking at the past, many spots for shame and guilt can come up. So, before we even start looking at the past, we built a trusting relationship between us, and we build self-love and compassion within the client, so that when they look at those experiences, those moments, those choices maybe that one has made, they can do it from a place of compassion. Like, okay, I can see my adaptation is why I did that, or my
Mm-hmm.
adaptation may have caused this. It is not me. It is not a reflection of myself. In fact, like my body was protecting me. And if you can look
Mm-hmm.
at it through that compassion and kindness and not shame, then you can start exploring a lot more.
Yeah, I love that message. Thank you. And before we leave, what piece of advice would you give somebody who is just now starting to realize that they might be dealing with trauma?
Yeah, so I actually think it's very similar to the advice you gave in the last episode. Go slow. Not expect healing to be quick. I think that actually made my healing longer because I was trying to find the quick fixes and searching for answers instead of just letting them naturally come to me. There aren't quick fixes. That doesn't exist in healing. We are actually rewiring our brains to form new neural pathways so that they're not taking the same pathways that we've created for 30 years. And that takes time. So give yourself grace while holding faith that post traumatic growth is 100% possible and will be a transformation like you've never experienced.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany, for taking the time to really just dive in and tell us your story and tell us, the different areas of trauma and healing. And you've really done a great job. So thank you again so much.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget to, yes, of course. Don't forget to subscribe so you can tune into future episodes. We are so excited. We'll be back with you next week to talk about the life of a mom and how insanely messy and amazing it can be. We'll see you next time.